How many of you feel like you are going maybe just a little bit crazy during this lockdown? Anyone? Or how many of you are feeling like you're just sailing through in serenity? What I'm hearing from most of my clients is it tends to be a bit of both. We're vacillating back and forth wildly between these two extremes. Well, you're not alone. I'm Brenda Cross, and I am the Chief Transformational Officer and founder of LifeSpring Learning and Engaging Talent Group. And we work with leaders and teams who are going through crisis and confusion. We help them break through to reset and restore communication and increase their productivity, sometimes doubling their productivity. I've had the opportunity to work with over 10,000 people across the globe since 2008. So I'm grateful and honored to be with you here today. So what's been happening in this very unique time, this COVID time during our lockdown, is that so much of our lives have been disrupted. We find ourselves now, we've got spring or summer interns, as in our children, and we also have new coworkers, our spouses and roommates, the people that we're living with. And so we're managing all these different aspects. And what has happened is that the way that we're used to coping with stress, those coping mechanisms, they've been stripped away. And what's going on then is all of the feel-good chemicals that we're used to getting, the endorphins, the oxytocin, and the serotonin, we're not getting them in the same way. And I call them, our happy hormones, and our unique cocktail, because no longer can we just go to the gym, or can we grab a colleague and go and have a lunch and discuss solutions over the latest fire drill. We can't get a hug from a friend or family member, or take our partner out at the end of a long week for dinner. And so we've got to then look at what are the options, because what happens when that wonderful cocktail of happy hormones stop flowing? Well, I found out over 10 years ago, I was in an accident that left me with a severe neck and back injury. And I was staring at the ceiling for weeks and months. And it wasn't until I got to physical therapy that I was able to start doing some work. And I'd have to lie sideways across a cab in New York City just to get there, because I couldn't sit because of so much of the pain. And I remember I was having incredible mood swings, and I was so isolated. I had gone from being really active, where I was going to the gym 2 hours a day, and I loved to dance. And I think I was playing still on a softball league at that point. And I was getting together with clients and friends on a regular basis. And now I was completely immobile and isolated. And thank goodness for New York City delivery, or I might have starved. But I couldn't even hold a book, so I couldn't read. And this was before Netflix. So I had a whole lot of time to myself. And I remember confiding to my physical therapist at the time, and I said, gosh, I just don't feel like myself, and I really feel like I'm going a little bit crazy. And he got a smile on his face, and he said, oh, you're a junkie. I said, what? He goes, yeah, you're a junkie, and you're going through withdrawals, not getting those happy hormones. He really opened my eyes that the way I was used to being sustained, having my spirit sustained, and my whole system, was through the forms of exercise and connection. And all of a sudden I didn't have them. Sound familiar? Now fast forward over a decade, and millions of us are finding ourselves isolated and unable to do a lot of the things that we used to do in order to get those happy hormones. So I think for a lot of us, it feels maybe a bit like this, or we've had these days where it's like, oh, I just can't adult, or we're completely frazzled. Do you relate? Had these moments? So There are a few things I want to talk to you about, certainly from the neurobiology piece, but we have some tools and tips to help you through. And we have a specific model around resilience and how you can rise in your resilience. But there are a few other pieces that are going on. In addition to not getting all of these hormones that you're used to, those feel-good hormones, the endorphins, the oxytocin, there's also something else that's happening where with the COVID piece, it can put us into fear, and that can trigger our flight, fight, or freeze response, or puts us in survival mode. So then we're dumping in a bunch of the stress hormones, the cortisol and the adrenaline. So we're really tipping the scales at this point. And it's no wonder that we feel like we're going out of my mind, or that we can't, that we don't want to adult and we'd rather just pull the covers over our head. But there's a vacillation. Like one day we're riding high and we're scrubbing the bathroom with a toothbrush and getting the grout and everything. And the next is like, oh no. And you're considering, is 8 o'clock too early to start drinking some wine? So you've got that double whammy, if you will. But then also, here's the other thing: if we've got social isolation and social distancing, which is also physical distancing. We're doing a lot on the camera. And so what happens is we're doing a lot of multitasking. And what happens in the brain is that we're burning glucose. The more we do rapid task switching, which is what multitasking is, because multitasking doesn't exist from a brain science perspective. That rapid task switching that we're doing, we think we're getting multiple things done, is actually burning all of that energy in the brain. And it can only make a certain amount in a day. So if you've had that feeling at the end of the day, even more so now during this time of brain fog, and you feel fuzzy and you're exhausted, part of it is because we're not getting all of those positive chemicals going, but then we're burning the energy that we have in the brain. And the last piece is that we're not getting FaceTime, like real in-person FaceTime. And while we're doing a ton of Zooms, maybe many of us are off of our cameras. So I encourage you to use your camera, and here's the benefit for you why. First of all, it's not about our vanity, it's about our humanity and our sanity. Because when we're able to see other faces, those mirror neurons in our brain starts firing, and that can help support us and help give us more of those positive boosts and the positive hormones going through the brain. So you get some benefit of doing that, the FaceTime on the Zoom pieces or on your Skype or whatever platform you're using. So I highly encourage you to get a little bit of that FaceTime so you can get some benefits, because isolation is considered by the UN, when prisoners are put into solitary confinement, it's considered torture. So we want to get as much opportunity to connect in various ways, as well as also see people. So I want to introduce you to our R.I.S.E model, our rise in resilience. And what is resilience? How do you define it? What I hear from most people, most of our clients, is that it's the opportunity in how we bounce back. It's, do we get up when we fall down? And hence rise. Can we rise? So I want to give you a brief introduction to our R.I.S.E model and to a tool, and give you a couple top tips just in the short time that we have here today. So the R is recognize. So recognize the dynamics of what's going on. And in this time right now, it's incredibly unique and it's uncharted territory for many of us around the globe. Recognize the hormonal piece. Recognize that you're getting probably dumped with a lot of stress hormones. If you're watching news and things like that, every time we do that, it puts our body into that threat response and can trigger us into fight, flight, or freeze, and dump us more with cortisol and adrenaline. And also recognize that we're not getting the same level of those boosting, those happy cocktail hormones. So just acknowledge that's part of the dynamic of what's going on, and that could fuel a bit of volatility as well as intensity. So know that those are being driven a bit more by the biochemical pieces and what's going on in the body. It's completely shifting right now. So that's recognize just what's going on. And the next piece is the I. The I, do you know what it stands for? It's inquire. To inquire and investigate, to go within, to be curious about your internal experience, and what may be coming up for you. It's like to ask, even to slow down for a moment and just consider, am I comfortable or uncomfortable in this moment? And if you're comfortable, awesome, keep going. If you're uncomfortable, that's a cue and it's an opportunity for us to get curious and to consider, okay, well, what is it that's going on? To get some clarity, because we've got to name it before we can tame it. So if we can start to identify what's going on, what are the thoughts? What are the sensations in the body? What are the feelings? What are the emotions? When we get some clarity around that, we can start to name it, then we can start to manage it and deal with it, right? And we can bring it up and allow that to be brought into the light, to be considered. And then we move it to the next piece, and we take that awareness that we have, that we've gotten from our investigation, from our inquiry, and we bring that to the S, which is the support. So support has two parts. So there's both the receiving of support and the giving of support. So two parts. And I want to start with the first, which is self. So self could also, the S could also stand for self-care. We hear it a lot. Resilience often includes a piece of, how do we refuel? How do we fill our cup? What is it like for you? What fills your cup? Do you know? Can you think of one thing that would help you to replenish? Because it's just like a car. We've got to constantly put fuel in it. It's not a one and done kind of thing. It's constantly, we're putting in fuel. How do we fill our cup? Like for me, one thing that does it for me is comedy. So I watch Dry Bar. Dry Bar is fantastic. It's clean comedy, safe for all ages. And I watch almost every night because that's also a great way to get endorphins and get some of those happy hormones going. So that's one way that I fill my cup. I also happen to really love foot massages, and I'm fortunate that I don't live alone, so I'm able to ask for those. And that's the piece too that's very important with support, is what can you ask for? And I know asking can be incredibly uncomfortable for many of us. And in this time, we really need to find different ways that we can get support. One great thing you might ask for those of you that have kids and you're managing homeschooling and all the rest of that, is maybe you can ask a relative or a friend to do some online babysitting. You can have somebody read a book to your child, because for those of us, that we're getting your child for an hour, it's a little bit different than when you're having your child for the whole time. We find it adorable and fun, and you can get a break. So maybe that's something that you can ask for. The second part of support is, what can you give? Here's the key. You've got to give from a place of a full cup. So we've got to make sure that we have a place and we have something to give. Otherwise, you're giving from a place of lack. Or if your cup is empty and somebody's thirsty, you literally have nothing to offer them. So absolutely wonderful to tap into when you are feeling full and replenished. What is there something that you can give? And there is a fulfillment factor. There's also a connection piece to that boosts our hormones as well, because we are tribal. I think if nothing else that we've learned during this time, that we are incredibly social beings and we are very tribal. So tapping in to your tribe. To then we go from support into the E, which is to explore. And explore perspective and meaning. And we have lots of tools and exercises that we do in our trainings that are really rich within each of these, but I just want to give you a couple pieces. Meaning and perspective. We are meaning-making machines as humans. So, and it's something you get to decide. You get to create the meaning. A great example is Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust. And he was able to make meaning of a horrible situation and realize that that was a key difference that made people survive and not. It's how he survived and helped many other people survive. It's because of the meaning that he gave that situation. So for me, with my accident, the meaning I gave, I'd have to keep saying, this is my before story. This is going to be something that ended up informing my work and has helped me help a lot of people. So that before story was part of how I created meaning out of a lot of pain and a time that was incredibly challenging. The other part of exploring is perspective. Again, perspective is something we get to choose as well. And I see something that's really interesting that happens sometimes when people are attempting to give perspective or support somebody in perspective. Sometimes it can come across as shaming. An example is, say there was a story I read of somebody who was going to be missing at graduation. And they were, they were very disappointed. It's a loss for them. It was something that they've been looking for and they've worked for 4 years. And a person came in and say, hey, kind of get a grip. There are people in this world who live on $2 a day. And it's like, yes, that's true. And I think that the attempt was to try to give perspective. But what can happen is sometimes is that we shame a person for their experience and their loss. We are all experiencing loss of many different types, multitudes, and loss is loss. It is not meant to be compared. We don't compare to each other. Someone is having a loss, they are in a grieving process. We want to be able to honor our experience and honor your experience of wherever you are with that. What perspective, when it's done, can be used to inspire us to tap into the better parts of ourselves, to tap into the resilience stores that we have inside us. A great example of that would be like the story of Anne Frank. Did any of you know, how many of you know how many days she was in hiding? 761 days. So now that puts perhaps our days, where I am, we're probably approaching day 60 in lockdown. Kind of puts that in perspective. Not judging any of us for our experience, but it can allow us to go, okay, other people have been in challenging circumstances and they've found ways through. What are the aspects that I can tap into for myself? So that's perspective, providing us the opportunity to inspire and find other resources. So the R.I.S.E model, recognize what's going on, recognize the broader context and how some of the biochemical pieces are working, then go inside, inquire and investigate, and then get some support. Ask, both get the support you can use, and then from a full place you can give support, and then go into exploring the meaning and the perspectives that are there. So that's the R.I.S.E model. You can rise in resilience. I hope this gives you just a little bit of insight and a few tools. By all means, we've got programs, additional resources available to you. Right now, we're going through a refresh on our website. We're taking that time, but you can find us at engagingtalentgroup.com. The best way is to find me on LinkedIn. You can find more articles and more tips on how to rise in resilience. And I thank you so much for your time. And stay healthy and stay safe and rise. Thank you so much.